Hey there. So today we're going to talk about forgiveness. And I think I've had a little bit of a hard time putting this episode together only because I've been working really hard on the concept of forgiveness. I have my own way of considering what I believe forgiveness to be, and I don't know that it necessarily is in line with what others might think. My upbringing was in the Catholic Church, and part of the traditions that we kept included engaging in the sacrament of reconciliation or confession. Usually, every couple of weeks, you would go to the priest and confess the things you were sorry for, the things you recognized that you did incorrectly, your sins. Once you did this, you'd experience God's healing through his forgiveness. It also gave you the opportunity to reconcile with the church because the church would be wounded by the things that you did. You would think that growing up in that environment, I would know a lot about forgiveness, right? Because if I received a regular clean slate and God could forgive me for being a smartass and misbehaving, I should understand that I needed to do the same with others, forgive those as I was forgiven. The challenges came when I became an adult. And unlike the God I believed in, I found myself not necessarily being so easily convinced why I needed to forgive. Well, what do we think forgiveness is? We know it's defined as a process of where someone who's been wronged chooses to let go of their resentment and sometimes, most times, decide that they want to be compassionate. But what happens when offering forgiveness is the last thing in your mind? When you think that if I forgive, I'm going to forget or accept this person having done what they did to me? Or does that mean I have to have a relationship with the person who wronged me? You can forgive a person while in no way believing that what they did was acceptable. And it's still considered an act of forgiveness. See, forgiveness is more of an emotional change that occurs within us, not necessarily turning away from the problem. It's this decision that we make to overcome the pain that was inflicted upon us, letting go of anger, resentment, or allowing ourselves to let go of the idea that we want to seek revenge. There's this researcher named Dr. Robert Enright, and he broke it down into like 4 different phases. And it's kind of interesting for us to see that because we do go through a lot once we've experienced pain and the opportunity or the thought about whether or not we want to forgive someone is there. The 4 phases that he considers are involved with forgiveness are 1, the uncovering phase, 2, the decision phase, 3, the work phase, and 4, the deepening phase. And I just want to talk a little bit about them. So the uncovering phase is obviously when we're first hit with the action that against us. It is the phase where we kind of sit there and say, like, what the hell just happened? And try to focus on what that behavior by the person who wronged us affected in our lives and what we lost as a result. Sometimes we don't take enough time in this phase because we don't realize how much this injustice impacts us. We pretty much sit and think about what we could have done to make the situation better or how we're going to try to fix this, even though we're the ones that have been wronged. If nothing's worked, maybe we would go ahead and just forgive the person who harmed us. But you can't begin to forgive someone unless you understand what happened that triggered your pain. The more that you consider your negative feelings, open healing can start. In the decision phase, you get a little bit more of an understanding of what forgiveness is. Here's where you get to make the decision to choose or reject forgiveness. And you have both as an option. You actually might decide that you don't want to forgive. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe you are not ready to let go of that anger. And I think what we don't realize is that's okay. You can always come back and go through the processes again if you need to. The other issue that we address here is whether or not we're forgiving someone because we want to, rather than forgiving someone because we're being pressured into it. This is usually where friends or family come to you and say, well, it's your only sibling, or it's your only parent, or it's your only friend. You have to forgive them. And really, forgiveness is a free choice that you make by yourself. Keep in mind, though, if you do choose to just focus on the injury or the person who caused you harm, you might actually be causing unnecessary suffering. Now, during the work phase, you start to understand your offender in a whole new way. It might actually allow for more compassion or empathy towards that person. So, what you pretty much are doing is getting a broader idea as to the reasons or the motives behind the offender, where you think of the way they were raised or their family situation, whatever difficulty they've been involved with that might have led to their taking things out on you or treating you the way that they have. When you're in the work phase, according to Dr. Enright, you really need to take the time to stand in the pain of it. It's almost as if you're measuring how heavy the burden is and acknowledging that the pain exists, that it's there. The more that you face it and don't run away from it, seriously, just let it be, you'll find that your level of heaviness or how intense your feelings are start to minimize, and you're able to look back and see where you've been able to make some changes and improvements and move out of being stuck with your feelings. Once you're dealing with less stress, you're able to start rebuilding the self-esteem that you had lost because now you really know what you're capable of. Then during the last phase, the deepening phase, you continue to decrease those negative feelings and you find more meaning in what you've experienced, recognizing how you've grown as a result. This is where you have the opportunity to reach out and be associating with people who might have gone through the same thing that you have. This is where maybe you might inspire someone who's going through what you have so that they also can see an end to their pain. Now, you have to keep in mind, though, that these phases, the process of forgiveness in this way, isn't something that fits everyone. And some people will find that they go through some phases and maybe not through others. It doesn't matter which direction you go in, as long as you experience some direction, forward movement on the journey that you're looking for, on the journey to forgiveness. So, what do you think is the hardest thing to forgive? How about having to forgive someone who isn't sorry? There are people who will never admit that they did something wrong, and yet it's still possible for you to keep going forward. And I want to say it's reasonable for you to expect that someone apologizes when they've done something wrong to you. Even if you were 100% in the right, it doesn't necessarily mean that that person is ready to admit to any wrongdoing. Sometimes those who've offended us the worst are the hardest people to get apologies from because there's a true denial that they might have hurt you. And because they truly believe that they didn't do anything wrong, they don't see where they realistically have to fix a situation that they had nothing to do with. Sometimes they aren't even aware that they harmed you. And that puts us in a tough place because how do you forgive someone who isn't that sorry or who you can't even communicate with? We aren't supposed to pretend like the hurt didn't happen, like forgive and forget, or even have to speak to that person again. When you forgive someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have an ongoing relationship with them. What happens is that we have our own shift within us where we're not carrying the pain the same way we did day one. And in doing that, we're able to lower those feelings of anger or anxiety and depression. And then we increase our self esteem and hopefulness. Being willing to let go of the hurt, you can have forgiveness whenever you want. Once you remove reconciliation as the goal, sometimes you feel like your pain is the only thing you have, and it serves as proof that something really bad happened to you. Forgiving someone can feel like you're agreeing with what they did, even when in your heart you knew that they did something wrong. But if you hang on to the anger, right, how is it serving you? Yeah, in the moment, it's totally empowering you, and you might actually deserve to feel that way. But after time, it's going to bring you down. It's going to make you tired and honestly more pessimistic and distrusting of those around you. My favorite is the judgment we get from deciding to forgive or not forgive someone. That is also something that rings true with a lot of our friends and family. Being ready to forgive someone who hurt you takes time, and your time, not everyone else's. It's impossible for you to know when or if you'll ever be ready. So if now doesn't seem like the time, you know what? That's okay. I think forgiveness can only come after a long process of healing. I've been faced with the need to forgive for the sake of my own mental health. I've experienced hurt in ways that when it happened, I said out loud, I will never forgive for what happened to me. When I was at the peak of my anger, honestly, I felt completely out of control, as if I was watching this show that was happening outside of myself. My anger brought me to this dark place where I felt I needed to keep to myself, and I closed off from the entire world. It put a disruption in my life where I felt there was no one who I can really turn to in order to climb out of the hole that was created for me when I was hit and while I was suffering. So I wasted a lot of time and energy in that dark place, but I needed to grieve and focus on what I believe had been taken away from me, how I'd been treated, and what I wanted going forward. I had to take a step back and make myself the priority. Look for the support I needed from the people who would give it to me, process my pain, and accept that things would just never be the same. I accepted the losses and focused on what I could actually gain eventually. And while this is really too hard to explain, I know that there's a part of me that now can forgive. It's not a forgiveness based on wanting to fix things. It's not a forgiveness based on allowing those who've hurt me back in my life. It's more of me saying, you hurt me, and use your way to try to get power over me. And I'm no longer allowing you to have that power, especially over my emotions. I take back my anger, my heartbreak, my pain. I no longer want you in my life, but I also don't want anything bad to happen to you. That won't fix anything. I'm moving on without you. And honestly, that's going to work for the both of us. Because I no longer can do the dance or sacrifice my happiness and peace to make you feel good. And the best thing about this, I now have the space I need to give to those things I put on the side in order to deal with all that nonsense. And I'm happy to have that space. it's made all the difference in the world and allowed me to be exactly who I want to be without having to apologize for it. Well, we made it through another episode, and I'm so grateful that you are here. Thank you so much to all those who have reached out to me and let me know just exactly how this podcast has enhanced their experience. I am so excited to hear from you. Reach out to me on email at makemewhole@bossesofbliss.com or on Facebook and Instagram at Bosses of Bliss and TikTok at Blissful Boss. Remember to complain less and do more. I'll see you next time. Take care.